to depart station. This is one of many checkpoints in the return that will continue all the way up until just before the deorbit burn, giving mission managers multiple chances to assess the weather at the splashdown zones, making sure everything is lining up before the Dragon departs. So we'll stand by for that final go, no-go poll, but for now, everything continuing to look good for an on-time departure. With that, I'll throw it back over to you, Kate and Gary in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Shaniqua. So separation is set for approximately 11:05 a.m. Pacific, 19:05 GMT, just a few minutes from now. At the moment, Dragon is in its final configuration before undocking, and we are waiting for mission operators to conduct their go, no-go poll on whether to move forward with the docking procedure.
Now, a note for on its trip home, just like during its approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure and deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew on board.
Once the docking sequence is complete, Dragon will use its Draco engines to thrust away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers or 4 departure burns, and that'll increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. From there, a phasing burn will place Dragon on a trajectory back to Earth.
On its trip home is deorbit, entry and landing, which covers all operations after the final departure maneuver. That includes trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, a deorbit burn, deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, and then finally, splashdown off the Florida coast, at which point our teams will recover the Crew 2 astronauts inside Crew Dragon from the water.
Yeah, so we are expecting the call for that go, no-go here in the next few minutes or so. So as we mentioned before, weather has been a watch.
SpaceX final configurations for undock are complete and nominal. Ground is go for undocking with the targeted undock sequence start time of 1900 Zulu. Please confirm visors are down and crew readiness for undock and departure at the planned time of 1900 Zulu.
Endeavour copies. Go for undock at 1900 Zulu. Visors are down.
Copy all. Thank you, Megan.
Station Houston on 2 for Mark. Perform steps 2 through end of 1.602 Dragon departure monitoring.
Copy 2 through end, and the ISIS crew is ready for Dragon undocking.
All right, and with that,
Houston copies.
With that, we just heard the confirmation that Dragon is go for undock. All of the teams supporting are ready. We're now waiting for that final undocking sequence to actually begin. So once that happens, right at 11 o'clock Pacific, it will take about 5 minutes for Dragon to physically separate from the International Space Station, which has been its home for the last 6 months.
This is the first step in the automatic undocking sequence. The first step is to release for those umbilicals to retract. Those umbilicals are what's connecting Dragon systems to the space station, transferring power, telemetry, and commands between the 2 vehicles throughout Dragon's stay. Once that's complete, Dragon will unlatch itself from the space station by releasing the 12 hard capture hooks in 2 separate phases. All of that will take roughly 4.5 minutes, and then Dragon will be ready to depart from station and begin to push itself further and further away using those Draco thrusters.
Dragon's initial departure from the station is a little different from other docked vehicles like the Soyuz that rely on springs to push them away from the docking port. Dragon will actually execute 2 very short thruster firings to undock using a combination of the 12 Draco engines that are around the base of the capsule. You can actually see some of them in this view. With the first, breaking any stiction between the Dragon and the docking port, and the second, slowly backing the spacecraft away. We're expecting the call for the undocking sequence to begin in the next couple of minutes or so, maybe 5 minutes if we start right on time. Since we've last been with you, a lot has happened. I think we went off air maybe about an hour and a half ago, right when the Dragon hatch was closed. In that hour and a half, Mark Van High on the station side closed the A-Pass hatch, or the hatch that's adjacent to that Dragon hatch, creating a vestibule in between the two hatches. He also closed the hatch to the pressurized mating adapter 3, which is on the nadir or the zenith side, space-facing side of No. 2. With all of that, he was able to execute the depressurization between the station and the Dragon, the vestibule, that middle part in between, putting it down to vacuum. You can see them all suited up from this camera view inside the Dragon. They also performed a series of leak checks. We had 4 good leak checks. And of course, just before we started this broadcast, the vestibule leak check, which is very important, making sure that that vestibule is down to vacuum and there's no leaks. That was performed, and we had a good leak check on there. Handing over to the SpaceX side to do a residual leak check. Now just really counting down to execute this undocking sequence. Again, a 5-minute sequence here to start in about 4 minutes.
Like we said before, those umbilicals are going to disconnect first. That's what is connecting power and telemetry and communication to station. And once those umbilicals are released, we'll then begin to unlatch the hooks that are physically connecting Dragon to station. Once again, all 4 Crew 2 astronauts are seated in their seats there inside Dragon Endeavour. There we see a shot with pilot Megan MacArthur there on the right-hand side, and Commander Shane Kimbrough on the left-hand side.
They even have a view of their own Dragon on the middle screen. That is fantastic. The Dragon itself is on the space-facing side of the International Space Station. When it undocks, it will perform those 2 undocking burns that we were talking about. The next burn that it'll perform is called an impulsive retreat burn. That burn sets it up in a position essentially at waypoint 1. Which is at about 220 meters. It'll do a short hold for about a minute before executing a fly-around maneuver. And it will be in this fly-around position for about an hour and a half, going essentially around the station fully, starting at the 12 o'clock position and then going full clockwise around until you hit the other 12 o'clock position. It's going to hit the aft side first, so we'll see the aft and then the nadir, or the underside of the International Space Station. That'll happen what's scheduled to be in an orbital nighttime. So it'll be the lights that are on the outside of the International Space Station that are illuminating it as the crew inside Dragon take some photographs of the exterior of the station. We haven't done this since a Soyuz fly-around in 2018 when we did a fly-around survey, and the crew were able to take digital photographs of the outside. It's really helpful for the analysis of the exterior and some of the integrity. There's a lot of cameras on the outside of the space station. In fact, you're seeing one of them now, providing a fantastic view of Dragon, but they can't see everything. So this survey is going to provide fill in the gaps, really, between what the station cameras can provide and whatever the robotic arm is able to provide as it surveys the outside. This will provide some of the latest data of what the status is of the outside of the International Space Station.
Now, for those of you that might be unfamiliar with Crew Dragon and how it works, there on your screen, we're actually looking at Crew Dragon, and to us, it looks upside down. To the folks in space, there is no right side up or upside down. So while it looks to us like the crew might be sitting upside down, they can't feel it as they are in microgravity. But the part that is connected to the space station is the pressurized section, which you see there. The part that we saw in the previous view that was the dark cylinder underneath the pressurized section, that is the unpressurized section, also known as the trunk. That portion of Dragon will be jettisoned prior to reentry. By doing so, we will expose the heat shield and allow for the heat shield to protect the capsule upon reentry. So just a little map of Dragon, if you will, for folks that might be unfamiliar. Looks like we lost our view there, but we'll bring it back as soon as we can.
and is very important, all of those different parts of the Dragon. Now as we're undocking, we do have word that we will not have KU or a video downlink of the Dragon during undocking. So there's a handover of satellites in between that time. So we'll be able to confirm verbally and with the teams supporting in Mission Control Houston and Mission Control Hawthorne that the sequence has begun and that the Dragon has physically separated.
SpaceX undock sequence has been commanded.
All right, so right on time. The undocking sequence has been commanded. This sets an automatic series of events to unlatch all 12 hooks that are holding Dragon in place. You heard about the umbilical retraction, and of course, we'll confirm physical separation.
Endeavour, SpaceX, umbilicals are demated.
There we go. Okay, so to take us through this sequence, now that we are in the undocking sequence, scheduled for an on-timed undocking at 11:05, let's send it over to Shaniqua Vereen over at Mission Control in Houston.
Thanks, Gary. And we just heard confirmation that the umbilical has retracted. We are currently waiting for all those hooks to open, and that's 2 sets of 6, so 12 total to unhook from the Dragon before we are
Endeavour, SpaceX on
called.
Dragon to ground. Repeating calls for TDRS. The umbilicals are demated and the undock sequence has been commanded. Group 1 hooks are driving.
Endeavour copies on the big loop.
And that was confirmation that umbilicals have retracted, and we are waiting for all the hooks to current hooks are driving, and we are waiting for all of them to unhook before we have that full confirmation of separation. You'll hear from the core and Hawthorne as
commentator.
Endeavour,
We're about
SpaceX first set of
halfway
hooks are open.
and that was confirmation from the core to the crew. We're about halfway there. Hooks of that first set are done. We're driving the second set now. Hooks are still driving.
All hooks are open
And we have
nominal.
confirmation of separation.
Endeavor copies.
Dragon has started to push itself away from the station. And with that, Shane, Megan, Aki, and Thomas have completed their journey aboard the International Space Station.
Station on 2, Dragon separation visually confirmed.
Houston copies and kickers.
Confirmed physical separation at 1:05 p.m. Central Time as the station was flying 259 statute miles.
Endeavor copies.
As the station and Dragon was... That was confirmed physical separation at 1:05 p.m. Central Time as the station was flying 259 statute miles off the coast of Chile. 2 good undocking burns and a nominal impulsive retreat burn. Next will be a brief hold at waypoint 1 before the fly-around sequence is executed. We'll be monitoring Crew Dragon throughout the departure sequence as it makes its way from the International Space Station. Godspeed to Shane, Megan, Aki, and Thomas. To take you through the rest of the departure sequence, we'll send you back over to Hawthorne.
Dragon eyes have converged, and Dragon is navigating on Dragon Eye 2. We will time out of Impulsive Retreat 1 point and into Go To 1.
Endeavor copies.
Dragon SpaceX, we see the onboard warnings for Dragon Eye 1. No correction is required. Dragon is navigating on Dragon Eye 2.
Copy. Good. Dragon Eye 2.
And we're following along as the Crew Dragon Endeavor is backing away from the International Space Station.
Go to waypoint. MSs are doffing suits.
SpaceX copies in Go To 1, and the MSs are doffing suits. We will transition cameras to external only if desired.
And SpaceX not required.
SpaceX copies.
Station on 2, the ISS thrusters are enabled.
Houston copies.
So a lot happening there. The Dragon is about 100 meters away from the International Space Station at this point. The crew inside have gotten the go to start doffing their suits, now past the dynamic phase of undocking where the suits are required. So they'll start doffing as they head out to waypoint 1, which is about another 100 meters away as they slowly make their way out. They're going to waypoint 1, which is about 200 meters away, right at the edge of the keep out sphere. They'll hold for about a minute before starting the fly around maneuver. Starting at this very top or zenith position towards the space-facing side. See them backing up. They're about at this position, actually, right now, about halfway. Then they'll execute a 50-second fly-around burn 1. This will take them from the zenith or the space-facing side to the aft or the back of the station and cruise for a bit until they hit the aft portion. It's expected that during this part of the flight will be in an orbital nighttime. So right about these two burns, fly around burns 1 and burn 2, We should be getting some views of the International Space Station, maybe even of the Dragon, but they will be a little bit on the darker side. Then, of course, the next two burns, burn 3 and burn 4, will be in the daylight, and the whole maneuver itself will take about an hour and a half. You can see the position of the Dragon, the very top portion of the Dragon with the nose cone face down towards the International Space Station at all times. This allows for the crew inside with a perfect window view looking down at the International Space Station to take digital photographs the entire way around. It's a photographic survey opportunity of the exterior of the International Space Station, allowing the crew to visualize some of the areas of the space station that can't normally be seen by some of the external cameras on board. Not too long after it makes this full loop over the course of an hour and a half, there are two departure burns. Departure burn 0, that gets them outside of the keep out sphere, which they will have been hugging for about an hour and a half, and then depart burn 1, which sends them right outside the approach ellipsoid. At that time, we are outside of joint operations between the International Space Station flight control teams and the Dragon teams here in Mission Control Hawthorne. They'll be taking control of Dragon's journey for the remainder of its flight down to splashdown off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, targeting an on-time splashdown at 7:33 p.m. Pacific time tonight.
Yeah, so we've had an exciting morning so far. The call-outs that we heard just a couple minutes ago was an indication that everything is looking good and that both Aki and Thomas can doff or take off their spacesuit. This will allow them to have a little better mobility about the cabin in order to take those photos. Like Gary mentioned, these photos will help basically fill in the blanks that the onboard cameras currently have on station as
SpaceX Endeavour MS-1 is out of the suit, ready to support fly around.
SpaceX copies. MS-1 is ready for fly around on Dragon ground.
All right, so there's that call indicating that Thomas has removed his suit and he's ready to take some photos. He'll be doing that as the nose cone is still currently open. And so there's actually a very small circular window at the top of the forward hatch. And he's going to be taking those photos of the station using that port, essentially. And it is tight quarters, so obviously being able to have a little better mobility will certainly be useful to him here coming up.
So again, they're past that dynamic phase, which is why they're getting out of their suits, and they'll remain there. The Dragon itself will fly autonomously. The crew do have the ability to execute small manual correction burns if necessary, but for the most part, Dragon will take that flight around the International Space Station automatically. The flight computers themselves were programmed just ahead of undocking, getting ready for that essentially fly-around sequence. For the fly-around sequence to begin, it's a different set of burns to get them out to that hold point and then eventually around the station. We are getting fantastic views from the Dragon Eye, some of the Dragon cameras that are on the forward end of Dragon pointing down, and that position will be held really throughout this entire fly-around flight. We're a little more than halfway there, about 130 meters at this point. Again, we're getting to about 180 to somewhere between 180 to 220 until we get to that waypoint 1 hold point. We will not stay there for very long. It's only about a minute. And then if everything looks good, which the flight control team are trying to determine right now if they're good to go to proceed, they'll execute that fly-around burn pretty much immediately.
Yeah, so that shot that we just had inside the cabin, you could actually see Thomas there just underneath Megan and Shane taking these photos as we had indicated. Hopefully we'll get that feedback momentarily. But
Endeavour,
this view...
SpaceX, no response required, but we are going to clear the onboard Dragon Eye 1 and Dragon Eye like sensor cross-check alerts from your board. They are no longer active.
Yeah, so this is a live view
Copy.
from Dragon, and there's that shot inside the cabin. Pilot Megan MacArthur on the right-hand side, Commander Shane Kimbrough on the left-hand side, and that's Thomas Pesquet, basically the designated professional photographer of this mission. If you've been following along on his Twitter account, there have been absolute golden photos that he's really captured all along this mission. And I'm excited to see, what he might be putting his skills to here as he continues to survey the station during this fly around.
Interestingly enough, it looks like the photographic survey is beginning now, even before the fly around, now that they have, they're only about 140 meters away at this point, but you can see an absolutely gorgeous view of the space-facing side of the International Space Station. Really good to take pictures now because we're getting this view while we're in an orbital daytime. It won't be long until we have a sunset here as we make that first burn maneuver to go from the very top, or the zenith space-facing side. We're going to first go towards the aft or back of the space station, towards the Russian segment. That'll be the first part of this journey around the space station to take this photographic survey.
Now, if you're looking at the screen and wondering what that red thing is floating near Thomas' head, and there's a blue one on the left-hand side, those are his earpieces. Those are basically part of the uniform. That's what allows him to hear communications during the mission, not necessarily at this point in time, but it looks kind of silly to see them floating there, so I just wanted to point those out for awareness.
Right below the International Space Station is the South Atlantic Ocean. We just passed the southern tip of South America, and we're now heading on a northeasterly course. The Terminator line that separates light from dark is right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean right now, so we're expecting sunset in about 15 minutes. So Thomas Pesquet taking pictures of the space-facing side of the entire International Space Station while he can. He's got about 15 minutes of daylight left.
Live shot there of Mission Control Center here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, just to the side of us. Like I mentioned before, it is a bustling Monday morning. Here we are a live manufacturing environment, so there is some background noise as we're literally building rockets and spacecraft right behind us. But yeah, that's a shot of our Mission Control here in Hawthorne.
So you're looking at the control room right now because we are sort of in between the video coverage that we're getting from the International Space Station. You see some of the views are absolutely gorgeous. There is a data link between the space station and the Dragon that provides high bandwidth communications. But for the most part, a lot of that video from the Dragon side will be when we go over ground stations. From the space station side, we use TDRS, or Tracking and Data Relay Satellites, that are in geosynchronous orbit about 23,000 miles from Earth. To give you some perspective, the Dragon crew and the International Space Station crew is about 250 miles, so quite a bit. But they provide that video coverage, the video downlink that we're seeing from the outside of the station. This is probably the longest period of a handover between the satellites that we'll see throughout the flyover maneuver. There's a couple of dips that we may see from video as they're making that their way around, and we'll just see what we get as we make our way around. We have that video coverage from the station camera, so we may be able to see the station side looking out at, there we go, we're already getting some of that. Fantastic. So you can see with the station cameras overexposed, that aperture nice and wide, we can actually see some of the Draco engines firing those thrusters to stabilize Dragon as it makes its retreat out to about 220 meters, now at about 160. Looking straight down at the International Space Station. Of course, they're looking straight up. Again, we're about 10 minutes away from an orbital sunset. You can see the views a little bit even dark at this point. It might be because of the overexposure, just to see some of those Draco engines firing. And high definition views as well. Fantastic. Hopefully we get a lot of these, Kate, as we make our way around the station. Again, we're in some of the longer handover periods now, but we may see it. The cameras themselves should be getting some good views of the Dragon as it makes its way around. Some of the views from Dragon looking down at the International Space Station that we were seeing towards very shortly after undocking. We'll maybe get some of those as well. So this will be a very fun hour and a half.
Yeah, I want to point out real quick while we still have this view that the tiny light there in the center of the dark circle, that is the window in which Thomas is utilizing to take photos during the fly around. So right now, Thomas is looking back at us as we're looking at him. Once again, you can see that nose cone is open. It will remain open for the duration of the fly around. And of course, prior to re-entry, it'll close once we are completely done utilizing the Draco thrusters located there at the forward hatch.
You can sort of see them too, the outline of the four forward bulkhead Dracos. Those will be used for a lot of the more important maneuvers. I think the most important of which is the deorbit burn. Very, very important maneuver that is essentially committing Dragon to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere and splashing down. Right now, we're still tracking weather, and we will continue to do so over the next 8 hours as we make our way down closer towards that splashdown time, 7:33 p.m. Pacific, 10:33 p.m. Eastern Standard. But those four forward bulkhead Dracos will fire for 16.5 minutes, super critical time, and that will put the Dragon in a position to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
This shot is also great because not only can we see the forward hatch, so that's the hatch that's utilized to get in and out of Crew Dragon while it's on station, but we can also slightly see the side hatch, which is on the left-hand side of the vehicle. It's a square shape, which doesn't look like a square from this angle. However, it's that panel there on the left-hand side of the vehicle. That, of course, is the hatch in which the crew uses to ingress or get on board Dragon on day of launch, and of course it will be the hatch that they use later this evening to egress or exit the vehicle once the crew splashes down and is recovered by the SpaceX recovery team on one of our recovery vessels.
And that'll be open for the first time in 199 days. By the time that they splash down at 10:33 p.m. Eastern Time, they're only about 7 hours shy of making it to that 200-day mark. But it will be 199 by the time they actually open up that hatch. It's been closed the entire time that it's been on station. Very important section of the Dragon, right towards us, where we're looking at from this camera view, towards essentially what is the top of that side hatch. That's where the drogue parachutes are. Shortly after re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, mortars will fire to release those two drogue chutes.
Endeavour, SpaceX for fly around.
Go ahead for fly around.
Right, Endeavour, you are go to command ISS fly around once hold 1 is reached. It is a required urgent command as soon as we enter hold 1 to limit prop consumption. So repeating, you are go to command fly around once Dragon enters hold 1.
Endeavour copies. Go to initiate ISS fly around at hold 1 with no delay.
That is a very critical time. Megan MacArthur, the pilot of the Crew 2 mission, by the time they actually get to what they're talking about, hold 1, that's waypoint 1. Right now they're at about 185 meters from the International Space Station. They're heading out to approximately 220. At that point, Dragon will transition to hold mode, or hold 1, whereas holding at that waypoint to limit the prop consumption, as was mentioned over the Dragon ground loops. The big loop actually right now, as even the station team is listening, and the station crew, Mark Vandehei namely, who's monitoring this sequence right now. That will be about a minute that they have from the time that they enter hold 1 to the time that the first fly around burn is initiated. That burn being the first of 4. It'll be a zenith to aft burn. It's about a 50-second burn that maneuvers the Dragon into a position to essentially cruise down to right behind or at the aft section of the International Space Station. So again, you're seeing, we were getting fantastic views of the Dragon looking right up at it. And Kate, you were perfectly describing that tiny little hole that Thomas is going to be taking photos out of. You can see even after that first burn is executed, those burns will actually keep Dragon in a position where that forward hatch, what we're looking at right now with that bright circle at the very dead center, that's where Thomas Pesquet will be taking some of the digital photographs. That forward hatch will be pointing towards the International Space Station at all times as it makes its way around the International Space Station with, again, all 4 fly-around burns to make that perfect loop all the way around.
Once again, this flyover maneuver is brand new to Crew Dragon. This is the first time that we will be executing it. The maneuver itself is basically a photographic survey of the station. Yeah, so there you can see kind of big picture. Dragon is going to be making one big loop around station, and Thomas Pesquet will be taking photographs through the port window, essentially there on the forward hatch of the station, which will hopefully fill in some gaps that currently exist in terms of the photographs that have taken of station. So even though there are many cameras on station, unfortunately there are certain spots, certain angles that can't be photographed just due to physical location. So Thomas will be taking pictures, and essentially Dragon will be making one big loop around station to perform this photographic survey.
This was a this was a very standard procedure for the shuttle. The shuttle used to undock from the International Space Station, regularly survey the station, providing updates, particularly when it was under construction, right? It was a very dynamic phase. That was more of the assembly phase of the International Space Station. We're in pretty much the third decade. After more than 20 years, we are in it. This is the time of maximum utilization. So there have been a couple of additions recently to the International Space Station, namely commercial modules. I think most recently was the NanoRacks Bishop airlock, which is essentially a way to deploy satellites. It also removes trash. It can also retrieve some ORUs or replacement unit spare parts from the outside with the help of the robotic arm. So there are a couple of new elements, and we'll be able to see that for the very first time after this fly around. The last fly around that happened was on board a Russian Soyuz, where Drew Feustel, NASA astronaut, used a handheld camera to do the exact same thing as the Soyuz undocked from the International Space Station. It did the same thing, did a photographic survey as it flew around, and so those are from 2018. So this will be brand new, 2021, and we'll get to see some of those new modules, like the NanoRacks airlock module, as well as a couple of other things. The Bartolomeo external platform that's on the European Space Agency side. So this will be very important to see.
So there on your screen, that is once again a live view of Crew Dragon Endeavour departing the International Space Station with the Crew 2 crew on board. And those pulses that you see are actually pulses coming from the Draco thrusters on board Dragon in order for Dragon to hold position and maneuver. Like we said, it's going to be performing this fly-around maneuver. Those Draco thrusters we can see activating in order to hold course.
It looks very bright because the cameras themselves on the International Space Station are right now overexposed. By doing so, it allows us to see some of those Draco maneuvering thrusters. There, it's becoming clearer now. We're in an orbital. We're about to enter into an orbital sunset. So you were getting some glimpses from the Dragon. We just got a second of it. It looked like looking down at the space station, still a little bit illuminated by the sun. That will not last very long. About 2 more minutes is when we're expected to hit that hold one point at about 220 meters. We're at about 217 at this point, so we're slowing down, getting ready to get to that hold point. Again, Megan MacArthur, the pilot, who from this camera view is on the right.
Initiated fly around.
There we go.
Copy, Endeavour. Fly around is initiated. We are tracking.
So a little bit earlier than expected, but it seems like we did hit that hold point, and it was not long at all before Megan MacArthur initiated that burn. Right now we're in a 50-second burn the first of 4 to fly around the International Space Station.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground. We see the onboard alerts for Dragon Eye. Time of flights are still converged.
Say again, you are not readable.
Repeating call. We see the onboard alerts for Dragon Eye 1 and Dragon Eye 2 geometric filters. The time of flight filters are still converged.
And SpaceX, still very difficult to hear. Copy, you see the messages. I believe these are expected in this quadrant. Is that correct?
That's affirmative, Endeavor. The geometric filters were lost, but the time of flight filters are still converged. So Dragon is still in a good configuration for fly around.
Copy, good config for fly around.
Station Houston for Mark. You are go to stand down for monitoring Dragon's fly around.
Copy, thanks much, and to the Dragon crew, I'll be looking for you if I get a chance to see you outside, but very quickly wanted to say thanks to all of you. Thomas, thanks for being such a great guy, an inspiring, famous person from France. Aki, you're a commander who knew exactly when to be serious and when to be funny. Let me just stop talking if I'm talking too long. Jane, thanks for being such a great example of what putting others first looks like. And Megan, thanks for becoming a sister to me up here in space. I'll miss hearing your laughter in adjacent modules.
Hey, Mark, we're really going to miss you. Had such a great time with you. Learned a lot from you. And I know you're going to treat Crew 3 really well. And let us know if we can do anything for you. Take care. Fly safe.
Yeah, get home safely. It's been great being part of your team.
Likewise, my friend. Take care of Anton and Piotr for us.
I'll do that right now.
You were hearing NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei, the sole NASA astronaut now on board the International Space Station, relieved of his duties to monitor the retreat of Dragon out to the hold point. And now he can stand down for monitoring the fly around. Some wonderful words from Mark Vande Hei, who got to spend the entire 197 days that the Crew 2 astronauts spent on board the International Space Station. Vande Hei being a crew member that's staying on board for almost a year as part of the Soyuz rotation crew. A shout out to the Crew 3 astronauts who are set to launch just a few days from now, no earlier than November 10th. To make their way to the International Space Station. It'll be Mark Vande Hei's job to brief them on everything that the space station, everything about the space station, where things are, about emergency procedures. So he'll do the handover as Crew 2 is returning home now.
As we mentioned previously, we prefer to do direct handovers from crew to crew, but the weather off the Space Coast and just around Florida in general has been incredibly tricky the last week, really. So the teams at NASA and SpaceX did reviews and jointly made the decision that the best thing to do for both Crew 3 and Crew 2 would to be bring the Crew 2 crew home before launching Crew 3, purely because of weather restrictions. We've been monitoring splashdown conditions on both sides of Florida, including wave height and wind speed, and those are really primary restrictions on allowing the crew to splash down, and it just happens to be that today was our best day to attempt that splashdown.
And before undocking, we did a weather brief, and And the Crew 2 astronauts are undocked today because they did a weather brief of the prime landing site, Pensacola, and it looks fantastic. Even with the trajectory, it's about 8.5 hours, even fitting in this fly-around maneuver, which they're doing right now. So we just executed a good 50-second burn, the first of 4 to fly around the International Space Station. We're now in a cruise phase between what's called the zenith, or the space-facing side of the International Space Station. We're heading to aft. That's the Russian segment of the International Space Station. We'll be getting some great views the whole way. We're in an orbital nighttime, so we're relying on some of the external floodlights on the outside of the space station to illuminate those views, and Thomas Pesquet has his camera ready, taking some of those surveys. We're getting some views as we're going in and out of that connection from between Dragon and station, but it looks like we have some Dragon views now. You can see a lot of, particularly the habitable volume of the space station is illuminated. We'll be in this position for at least this one, from the zenith or the space facing to the aft or the back, for about 20 minutes. It's about a 20-minute transit to get to that next point, which is essentially right on the V bar, or the velocity bar, that's directly behind the International Space Station. There are no hold points throughout this maneuver, so right at about that time, they'll execute another 50-second burn. That'll do essentially the same thing, maneuver from the aft section or the back to the very underside of the International Space Station. We did hear Mark Vande Hei actually mention that even though he's not in a monitoring phase for watching the fly-around maneuver, he's been relieved of those duties. Right on the Earth-facing side of the International Space Station is a 7-bay window called the cupola. Provides fantastic views of the Earth, and it's used very frequently for capture operations for some of the cargo craft that come to and from the International Space Station. But it'll also provide a very good view of his crewmates who will be flying around the International Space Station at that time on the underside or on the Earth-facing side of the International Space Station. So we'll hopefully get a couple of fantastic shots from Mark Vande Hei taking some of those photos. By about that time, when the Dragon is directly underneath the International Space Station, we should even be in an orbital sunrise. So we should get some sunrise photos as well.
Yeah. The shot that we had a little earlier with that nighttime view and all the exterior lighting of station, something about it so black and white, kind of looked like it could be in a Kubrick film.
Right.
Yeah. As we saw before, oh, right there it is, actually. We have some shots there inside the Crew Dragon capsule. You could, when we get that back, you might notice that Thomas Pesquet has taken off his spacesuit to allow him to have better mobility while taking some photos. Once again, this fly-around maneuver is essentially a photographic survey of station, and this is super helpful because, as Gary mentioned before, the last time this was performed was 2018, I think you said?
That's right.
And there have been lots of new additions on station since then, so this is a new capability for Crew Dragon. This will be the first time we're executing it today. And so Thomas Pesquet will be taking photos. They're in night mode inside Crew Dragon.
It's likely to limit the glare from the lit cabin inside the Dragon, likely reflecting off of the single window that Thomas Pesquet is using to take those photographs. We're in an orbital nighttime, right? So the only thing illuminating the outside of the space station is the lights of the space station itself. So limit those glares and get even better photographs. I cannot wait to see these photographs that Thomas is taking.
Yeah, you can kind of think of it as, imagine if you're in a car and, somebody's driving a car in the middle of the night and you're sitting in the passenger seat and you turn the interior cabin lights on and you try to take a picture of something scenic outside, right? You're probably not going to be able to capture that because the interior cabin lights are reflecting off of your window. So you turn the lights off and enable night mode on your camera and take some pictures.
I bet you they do the same thing during crew sleep as well. The Crew 2 astronauts had about a 24-hour transit to the International Space Station. Almost. It was just shy of 24 hours. So as part of that was an 8-hour sleep period. So everybody found a place inside Dragon, either bunking up in the seats, which I think is more common, or just finding a random spot to strap yourself and float, but they get an 8-hour rest period. Not on this flight, because it is a very short transit, and so we're going to be doing this for about an hour and a half, circling around the International Space Station, and then from there, you're really only at about, 6.5 hours, maybe 6 hours, from the time that you execute that first departure burn, which is departure burn 0, to break out of the fly around, and then make your way towards splashing down off the coast of Florida.
Yeah. So once again, we have been keeping an eye on weather. We are targeting a splashdown off the coast of Florida near Pensacola, and we're targeting that at 7:33 p.m. Pacific time this evening. So, like Gary said, once we complete the fly around maneuver, while it will be another 6.5 hours left, big picture, that's actually a pretty quick trip home, and I'm sure that after the 199 days that they have spent in space, they're all excited to get home and see their families.
Absolutely. So they're going to be splashing down off the coast of Florida, and there's going to be recovery teams there. The Go Navigator recovery ship will be stationed out in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll see a lot of that action as we get closer to that period, about 8 hours, maybe a little less than that at this point from now, until we actually splash down off of the coast. We're going to see all the action. It'll be a nighttime splashdown, unfortunately, but we did see a lot of that for Crew 1, and we did get some pretty good views of the fast boats going out and really readying that capsule inside the water to be picked up by the A-frame, which is on the back of the Go Navigator and positioned inside the Dragon nest. Like you said, Kate, from there, the crew themselves are going to be extracted, or they're going to egress the Dragon spacecraft. There are some medical facilities that are on the boat, but what will likely happen is they'll take a helicopter ride out to the coast of Florida, where they'll have different planes stationed ready to take them home. 3 of the crew members, Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur, and Aki Hoshide, will take a plane out to Houston. They'll undergo a series of additional medical checks and just make sure they're ready to go, and they'll have a chance to see their family. Thomas Pesquet will depart for Europe. So we're in the middle of a fly-around period now, so we should be in this period for, it's a cruise phase between the zenith or the space-facing side until we get to the aft side. We're here for about another 10 minutes. It's about a 20-minute transit from the very top, or the R bar, essentially right in line with the top of the International Space Station, to the aft position. There's going to be no stops along the way. It's a very fluid transit from each of these different periods, but once we get to the V bar, we're essentially right in line with the velocity bar of the International Space Station. You can see it there. It's the point directly to the back or to the aft of the International Space Station. Right there, they'll execute another 50-second burn to enter into another cruise phase. It limits the prop, right? They need to save a lot of that prop for some of the departure burns, and you can see 2 of them are part of this fly around to actually break out from it. But this is essentially where we are right now. In fact, we're about halfway through the maneuver. This position that you're seeing right now in this graphic is pretty much where they are, about halfway between the zenith, or the space-facing most point, and the aft, or the backmost point of the International Space Station. And again, a 50-second maneuver. It's just to limit prop. After these 50-second burns, they enter into a cruise phase. So the next maneuver will be just about another 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that, 25 minutes, to get from the aft position to the nadir, or the bottom position. Right about that time, they'll be entering into just about this period where you see the Crew Dragon on this graphic. That will be about where we see an orbital sunrise. So we'll be able to photograph the underside of the space station while it's lit and illuminated by the sun. And about that time, we should see Mark Vande Hei. We'll not see Mark Vande Hei, but it's about that time that Mark Vande Hei, from out inside the space station, will be taking digital photographs of the Dragon, as the Dragon is taking photographs of the cupola. Maybe we may even get to see Thomas Pesquet take a photo of the cupola, maybe seeing Dragon, seeing Mark Vande Hei inside. Another 50-second burn right at the bottom there at the nadir position to get over to the forward end of the International Space Station, all in the daylight. So we should be getting some great views of, well, at this point, which is the U.S. side, U.S. OS side. We'll be getting to see some of the U.S. modules, some of the commercial modules that I was talking about, as well as the international modules. Right about here, you'll get some great views of the nadir, the underside, as well as part of the forward parts of the Japanese module, the GEM, as well as the Columbus module, which is the European module, each with their own respective external facilities. The Japanese exposed facility has a lot of experiments on the outside, and then we have the commercial module Bartolomeo, a ESA, European Space Agency astronaut, and Airbus partnership, which is another external platform, does a lot of the same things, external payloads. So we'll get to see some of those, which have been installed. Well, the Bartolomeo, at least, has been installed recently.
Endeavour, SpaceX on Dragon to ground for cabin temperature.
Go ahead on Dragon to ground.
We see on the ground that the cabin temperature has been increasing slightly and is at a little elevated level. We're wondering how you're feeling in the cabin and if you'd like us to take any commanding to cool the cabin off.
In SpaceX, our temperature is adequate at this time.
Copy that, Endeavour. Thank you.
All right, no need to adjust the thermostat for the inside of Endeavour. All the crew feeling pretty good. We were seeing Commander Shane Kimbrough and pilot Megan MacArthur inside, stationed in their same seats. They were still suited up. We saw Thomas Pesquet doffed or took off his suit fairly quickly after undocking and some of those initial burns, the undocking burn and the impulsive retreat burn, because it's his job to take photos of the outside of the International Space Station. I thought I saw Aki there for a bit.
I think he
with
did.
His suit still on, assisting Thomas Pesquet, but we'll be in this position for quite some time. The whole fly-around maneuver takes about an hour and a half.
Now, for those that might be unfamiliar with how teams in space communicate with those on ground, you have probably noticed by now that there is a beep that precedes communication. This is known as the Quindar tone. If you've watched pretty much any space movie ever, you probably might recognize it. But essentially, that tone rings, and then so for example, if I were calling Dragon here from SpaceX, I would say Dragon SpaceX because I am calling Dragon and I am calling from SpaceX. So you basically identify the destination first, as well as the origin of the communication as well.
And then what loop you are calling on.
Yes.
So it's who you want to talk to, who is calling, who is doing the calling, and then what loop